I don't think they can hold it in any longer. I think it's really a case of that. I knew all this about Bormann and many other things because I was hooked up with many people who were in German intelligence and counterintelligence during the war. Most of them were colonels or generals. And they would tell me about all these things. Of course, this was after the war was over, and it was in the 1950s. But I really get filled in on it. And I've known about Bormann for 55 years, 50 years.
You never talked about that here. Was that because of national security?
They can't hold it in any longer.
Yeah. Well, you're right, Bob. They can't hold it in any longer. But it's just so incredible that Hitler was created by the British and U.S. government on record.
There's a book called Hitler at Versailles by Leon Degrelle. And Hitler was born at Versailles. And the whole thing was set up, the reparation movement, the depression in Germany during the 1920s, the evolution of Mussolini from being a communist into a fascist, and then the ascension of Adolf Hitler with money from Paris, London, New York, the Bushes and their family, etc. The whole thing was a setup. And all those people get killed for nothing.
Well, that also came out in the McCormick-Dickstein Committee with Major General Smedley Butler of the Marine Corps. He was the only two-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner at that time. I think he still is. Most highly decorated in U.S. military history. I mean, a real Rambo. And of all these conflicts, he'd overthrown more than 14 countries for the United States and the banks. So they came to him in 1935 and said, we funded Hitler. We're going to have a fascist takeover here in the U.S. as well. That's when it could have gone both ways. He played along and then blew the whistle. And that was in the New York Times, everywhere else. It's in my film Martial Law. We also get a little bit into it in Endgame. But the issue is that later in the 30s, that came out in the McCormick-Dickstein Committee, but the average American doesn't even know, though I had the film reels shot at the time in there in the congressional hearings.
The more you dig, the worse it gets.
Well, thank God he played along with them for 6 months, and he was to lead a 500,000-man team. They were already federalizing the cities covertly, and Bush's granddaddy was one of the head honchos. It's just unbelievable. But see, he wasn't a German agent. People always say no. The German agents were their agents. People get this chain of command wrong. Well, I mean, the King of England had to advocate not over the lady he married. He was in Germany when the war started. He's 100% German. Edward VIII. In fact, guys, Google Edward VIII with Hitler, and you'll see him heiling Hitler. Pull it up. It'll be a bunch of photos, but the most famous one is Hitler in his car, and the King of England is heiling Hitler to him. You can't make this. Kitty Kelly's books about it. Okay, Bob, I want to hold you a little bit in the next hour. I should have asked you off air. You may have another interview coming up, but I want to start getting into this.
I'm free. And
okay, good.
I want to say one more thing, and that is the book, Hitler Born at Versailles by Leon Degrelle. I knew Leon Degrelle very, very well. He was a good friend of mine, and he was the head of the Wallonian Division in the SS during the war. And he was one of the people who really filled me in on what went on. And I financed that book.
Amazing. So you've been not violating your national security letter, but leaking a bit out so people could learn about that. Well, listen, one of my grandfathers was a lease hound, just mid-level, working for the oil companies, out trying to get folks to lease their land to him in West Texas and New Mexico. And he said after World War II, there were more Germans in many of those towns than there were Americans. And they'd be in the bars and the steakhouses. And he said he'd see Germans he'd seen in newsreels just walking around with CIA people all over the place at these military bases, because that'd be the only place to go eat when you're out driving around the middle of nowhere in New Mexico or West Texas. And he was telling me about this stuff, and he wasn't in intelligence. You know, he'd just been in the Air Corps. So just Germans everywhere, and Germans all. And then my uncle lived in Guatemala. He told me about all the old Germans down there, and I mean, they're just Germans all over the place.
They were taken out on the rat line.
Operation Paperclip. Okay, we got to shift gears now. There is Edward VIII with Adolf Alois Hitler, and that is right at the start of the war. Heil Hitler. There you go, ladies and gentlemen, the King of England, Heil Hitler. Okay, let's go ahead now and get into the global carbon tax. On record, Time Magazine, Financial Times of London say it's a world government tax to private banks. You'll even pay some of your taxes to Al Gore. He said, what's wrong with that in front of Congress 2 weeks ago. Here is Pat Buchanan, though, saying it, and people are now attacking him. This is Pat Buchanan as we analyze it from MSNBC. Here it is.
I'm joined now live from Washington by MSNBC political analyst Pat Buchanan. So with another good morning, Pat, we've got the president calling this new climate bill a jobs bill because he says it's going to create clean energy jobs. You have House Minority Leader John Boehner saying it's a tax bill. Why doesn't anyone want to call it a climate bill?
Well, because the science is suggesting that maybe all of this isn't really happening, or it's not really dangerous, or it's not really man-made. Barack Obama, the president, was right when he said we shouldn't be afraid of the future. That is how this bill got passed, through fear. We're all going to change. The climate's going to change. The oceans are going to rise. Our cities are going to be underwater. But more and more science is coming forward to say this is a hoax and a scam, which is designed to transfer wealth and power from the private sector to the government sector, and from the government of the United States to a world government, which is what we're going to get in Copenhagen when we get the Kyoto II agreement.
Okay, here come the emails. Anyway, Pat, when the bill passed,
that's enough of it.
Republicans broke into a sort of...
We've got links to it up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Again, mainstream news articles, I've got dozens of them in my film, The Obama Deception, blow-ups of the articles. They're saying world government, but then if we say we don't want world government, Bob, they say we're kooks and it doesn't exist.
Well, we just keep on telling the people, and they'll catch on.
Absolutely. Folks, get the Obama Deception on DVD at Infowars.com today. Get this, have viewing parties, show it to everybody. It shows you this guy is the closer. He's the closer for the globalists to bring us into bankruptcy so the private bankers can own our butts. Get the Obama Deception at Infowars.com today.